installer is calling me. Hello.
This is
How you doing, Jose?
What did I just say? We screwed
If this had happened during the show, it would have been better.
All right, cool. Is this your cell phone? You want me to text
Hello?
you the number of the guy that's actually on the ground there?
Hello? Hello?
All right, I will do that.
Hello? This is
All right, no problem, Jose.
Hello.
Take it easy.
Hello?
Bye.
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
I'm really sorry, guys. Just let me.
Yeah, we've been live the whole time. This is the Cafe Racer podcast, episode 28 for June 2nd, 2018. And I'm Steven.
And I'm Wes.
No, you first. Do I go? Do I talk first?
I'm Wes from the Chasing the Horizon podcast, and I'm currently working while we're doing this.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah. Okay.
Jose? Hello? Scott, are you online? Hello, Scott? Scott, are you there?
Jose is on the way. My day job, we just moved to a new office, and the Comcast is the only choice we really have.
That's a shame.
Well, it is what it is. Verizon is the other one in the building, and they only have DSL to this building, which is a 10-story full-on official office building. BR Brandon copy.
Yeah, it sucks when you have to deal with anybody that provides cable. I'm 100% convinced of that because the whole thing is a scam. So you know how everyone talks about like cut the cable, the whole cable cutting movement, use other sources. They will not allow you, in my opinion, to go get a high-speed internet connection for anything less than when you're paying for the full package.
Oh, I'm sure you're right.
And maybe it's different for a corporate account, like in business, and you just say, "Hey, we just want high-speed internet." But residential, we had the Mac Daddy package, so we were paying, let's say, $200 a month for everything. And I just got bent out of shape and called and said, all I want is basic cable with the local stations. First, the guy goes through this whole exercise of he doesn't understand what I'm talking about. Well, why wouldn't I not want HBO and all these other things? And I told him I'm not interested in any of that. I can use Netflix.
Right.
And when I finally got to the point of where he understood what I wanted, it was like $199. I'm joking a little bit, but it wasn't much of a bargain. And I said, okay, let's say I just cancel my entire account. I want to come back as a new subscriber, and all I want is a high-speed internet connection. That's it. I don't even want TV. Oh, it's about $199.
Yep.
Yeah. You're better off getting the whole package.
Well, it's funny because I was organizing this for my workplace, but the speed for the office and my house is the same, but the business account costs $112 more a month.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I guess maybe they have better customer support or something. I don't know, but.
Okay, so for those of you that have been listening from the beginning to this complete nonsense, let me introduce my guest today. I've got Wes Fleming from Chasing Horizons, which is the BMW Owners Group podcast, right, Wes? And I've got my buddy Scott Auld, who is one half or the creator of Aim Moto, which is on YouTube, and a great motorcycle YouTube show.
Absolutely.
Probably.
I really love Scott's format because a lot of the times, sometimes he has a point, he's doing a specific thing, but other times he's just sitting on his motorcycle riding down the road talking about the landmarks that he's going past. That I love that kind of thing. It is a very interesting show.
Nothing.
It is, but it's a very interesting show, and it hooks you once you start watching. And there's some really funny moments on there, and some of the conversations that are being had with whoever he's riding with are really funny. So check it out on YouTube. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So guys, Scott and I are here in South Florida. I know we probably haven't done a lot of riding because it's been pretty flooded here. How about you, Wes?
We had the wettest May, I think they said in 100 years, something like that. And the forecast, I posted a picture, a screenshot of the forecast. I think it was last weekend. We had 9 days of thunderstorms predicted. And it's been mostly raining at night, but it's rained every day which is weird for Central Virginia this time of year. We just don't get that much rain.
But that tropical storm that came up from the Gulf went right by you guys, right?
Yeah, it did.
Or the remnants of it, and it dumped a crud of rain on you guys. I think that's part of what you guys are getting, right?
Yeah, you guys kind of lucked out, and that didn't turn hurricane and hit you, but it put a lot of rain on us, and there was some real bad flooding. They canceled school actually about a week and a half ago because of the rain, and I was critical of that decision until I saw the photos of the wrecked bridges and washed out roads, and it was really kind of surprising.
Yeah, we got lucky as usual down here. The thing tracked more west, and we were spared, but we did get a lot of rain, and there was we didn't get the flooding like the Northeast saw. But we had localized problems down here, which is, whenever it rains and it floods in Florida, for some reason, everybody turns on the stupid light in their vehicle and they'll like drive into canals and do stuff that they normally wouldn't do on a dry day. But for some reason, when it rains, they just decide, you know what? I see that puddle over there off the road. Let me drive in there and see what I can do.
Let's see how deep that is.
Maybe it's a parking lot. I don't know. Maybe there's a sale going on, and we get these calls for car in the canal, and you're looking at the news going, what was he doing all the way over there? Like what? So it amazes me.
Well, and Steve, do you have a car? Because I know Scott doesn't.
No. Scott is a hardcore motorcycle commuter. Yeah, I have a truck actually, and I couldn't really survive without it, I guess, because of all the crap I haul around all the time. I'd be renting a truck constantly, but I used to live about, well, I kind of still do, but I have about an hour commute, and I used to ride a lot to work in the rain. I didn't mind, but like I said, the traffic here, it just becomes more dangerous than a lot more dangerous than when it's normal day here driving, especially on the Florida Turnpike or I-95, and I had to take some type of highway, to get to work. But yeah, Scott. That when I first met Scott and he had the 250, I thought that was just like his play bike, and then he's like, no man, that's what I ride, and he's
every day.
Yeah, he's hardcore. So when it's really bad out, Scott, are you still riding to work every day?
Yeah. Rain gear.
Yeah, and you're not a short commute either. What, you're like 20 minutes maybe?
It takes about 35 minutes. So it's 10 miles, but it's 35 minutes just because South Florida traffic, right? But you got rain pants, you got waterproof boots, you got a rainproof jacket. The helmet doesn't let water in. I get to work dry.
Yeah. No, it's doable. It's just it is. You got to really plan out your life if you're gonna be just using a motorcycle. And I mean,
absolutely.
Scott's got access to a vehicle because his wife's got a car, so he still has that access there. For people that don't and they just live solely on a bike, man, I look up to those guys because
that would be rough to have zero access to a car at all.
The last time I did that was I want to say it was probably 6 years ago, and my brother needed a work vehicle, and I'd been thinking about getting rid. I had a Ford Explorer at the time. I'd been thinking about getting rid of it and getting something else, something a little smaller, a little better gas mileage. And it just seemed to present a good opportunity, and I gave it to him. And I was like, I got motorcycles. I'll be fine till I figure out what I want for a car. And it was the worst 6 weeks of weather that we'd had in like 10 years. We had 3 hurricanes. I felt like I was molding. I was teaching college at the time. I'd get to class and have to, spend 5 minutes in the back peeling off my soaking wet gear. And by the end of the first month, by the end of the first 4 weeks, all my gear had started to smell funky. So I couldn't get a car fast enough after that. And I don't know if I could ever go back to the motorcycle only lifestyle.
Yeah. I mean, it would be tough. I would really have to rearrange things and count on friends for, trucks. I have a little bit of an advantage because I work for government and I'm part of the emergency operations team. So I have a city vehicle available if I need it, which I used during the hurricane last time. I parked my vehicle, and actually I didn't have a vehicle. I got in an accident. That's when I was rear-ended. So I had a rental car right when the hurricane was going to come. I went and returned the rental car, grabbed a city vehicle, and that's what I lived in until everything was done. But hey, just a quick note for those of you who are listening. and been like, did I miss a show? Because our last episode was in the middle of April. Really apologize for that. Crash has been on deployment, and I got sick, which I'm still getting over some of the remnants of it, where I thought I might have had pneumonia, but it was actually bad bronchitis. So I couldn't have a conversation for more than a minute without coughing. And between that and work and scheduling, we're back on the air. So
yeah, have you heard from Crash lately on his deployment? How's he doing?
Yeah, I can talk to him through like Facebook Messenger. It sucks. He's out, he's away from home, and he's out in the Pacific. Like, I'll see pictures that he'll post on Instagram of some stuff. He posted some pictures of motorcycles in Vietnam. It's a hardship whenever you're away. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's really not like a vacation, because you're gone and you're working. You can't really go anywhere, and you're working all the time, whether you're off duty or on duty. You're still on the ship, so you can't really leave.
Yeah, and my dad was in the military. He was in the Air Force, and he was with us. The family was together most of the time, but we got dragged all around the country, and it seems kind of first world problem to say dragged all around the world, but when you're a kid, all you want to do is be with your family and go to school and have fun and play video games or go out for baseball or whatever, and they try to make those things available to you, but you're still separated from your extended family, from uprooted every couple of years, moved around, doing this, doing that. So I got a lot of sympathy for Crash while he's out on his deployment. I not that I was ever in the military, but I kind of know what it's like to be separated from everything and everybody, and be in a foreign environment for any extended period of time. It does kind of suck. Yeah. But I'm glad that people like him are willing to do it.
Yeah, no, and he's on this deployment. He's on a hospital ship, so you can imagine wherever they are. Hopefully they're doing good, but hopefully he'll be back soon, because we've got a lot of stuff we want to do, and we're definitely going to be at AIM Expo in October.
Well, I'll see you there.
Yeah, and we're talking. I'm still kicking the idea around. We haven't planned anything. I know it keeps getting later in the year, but I'd like to go up to ride at least part of the Mid-Atlantic BDR, as Scott calls it, the Mabder.
No, I don't.
No, I don't.
No, I don't.
Who was that? Was that Doug? Yeah, Doug.
Not really. No, there's a guy at our work that's calling it that. So that kind of became a joke when the guy at our work started calling it. When the guy that went up on the trip, and I got his footage, and I put his footage on my channel.
With the GS that's always parked out there. Did you guys correct him and say it's not the Mabder, or he just
it's too fun to hear him say the Mabder.
Awesome. That video was fantastic. It was funny before I knew what I knew about the background, about how the guy that got so muddy right at the beginning is so meticulous about his bike, right, and being clean. And I went back and watched
a speck of dirt and mud and keeping it clean, and then
well, and you can see there's one spot where there's like a little glob of mud on his fender, and he just kind of goes and wipes it off, and then he rides 10 feet down the road and drops the whole thing in a giant puddle,
including himself.
Almost like it was scripted, like, all right, drive down that road and then fall over in there.
Right.
Oh, it was awesome. Is that the first one of those videos that you ever did for somebody else?
I don't remember. Did anybody else ever give me any footage? I can't remember.
You've done stuff for us.
We did, yeah. I mean, remember the time we did the review of the cycle pump, right?
Yeah. And
we shared footage and did a two media release, or whatever you want to call it.
Scott's a great editor too. I mean, it's definitely a skill you got to learn, and there's some creativity and talent involved too, and knowing how to use, like anything else, knowing how to use whatever tool you've got. So it's hard for me, because my background is still photography, and I came from the film days. So to put together a video like he does is difficult for me. And
if you look at some of my older videos, you'll see, the evolution of learning how to edit a little bit. And you look at some of the older videos, and like, I watch them, I'm like, cut that out, snip that part. It's boring. Take this out. Get rid of this.
Yeah. I mean,
you learn as you go.
I wonder sometimes when I look at some people's, not even in the motorcycle community, but just YouTube content providers in general, that have incredible video. Like, there's a friend of mine's daughter's boyfriend is a kid who's in like college for finance, and this kid when he's not in school, he takes the advantage of being able to travel, and he travels and he takes unbelievable video and puts these short clippets together on YouTube. And I was talking to the kid one day and I'm like, you know, you could easily be a director, or the content that you produce is incredible. He's like, thanks a lot. You know, I just learned how to do it on my own. I'm like, you little bastard.
Yeah. There's a couple of, I pay attention to a couple of podcasting groups, you know, just to kind of get a feel for the community and, you know, be able to offer my limited expertise when people have problems and whatnot. And I'm kind of astounded when people talk about having editing problems because, well, number one, I barely edit my show at all. But number two, I come from a music background. I've done a ton of music recording in my past. So to me, you know, editing together a podcast is, you know, easy peasy lemon squeezy. It takes me, once I have the audio pieces, I can put together an hour show and listen to it as I go along in an hour and a half. You know, so
yeah, editing talking is a lot easier than editing music, isn't it?
Oh, it's so much easier.
You don't have to find the beat.
No, I mean, I learned how to, I didn't know any of this crap, and I learned how to use Audacity, and now my workflow is pretty quick because it's limited to, like Scott said, just talking, you know, a mono channel talking, and it's fast. But even you guys that are musicians, and man, I've watched some of the videos, like when looking at researching products like on Zoom, you know, and they're showing this guy recording a track with a guitar and then putting something down with a piano and then kind of putting it all together and then adding in some vocal. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I didn't even know they were able to do half the stuff that they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's neat. So listen, let's get back to motorcycles real quick.
Oh, right.
Wes, you got a really cool show, and
thanks, I appreciate that.
Tell us what the evolution was. First of all, like, when did you start biking? Were you always been a BMW guy, or did you learn on something else, start with something else? And
well, you know, I used to, okay, so I'll tell you the roundabout story. It's not super long, but I'd always been around motorcycles. I lived on military bases all over the US and Europe, and there was always somebody that my dad knew that had a motorcycle. But when we lived in Germany, I remember my dad picked us up from the airport. This is 1970. When did Star Wars come out? Was that 77?
Yeah, probably.
It was 1977. I was however old I was then, 7 or 8 years old. And my dad picked us up from the airport, this big adventure. We had just moved to Germany. I flew to Germany with my mom and my two brothers. My dad picked us up in this rickety ass old Mercedes, which, you know, in Germany in the 1970s, you could get a 10 or 12-year-old Mercedes for $50 practically. And we're going down the highway, and it was a rickety car, so he wasn't going very fast. And this kind of black streak came out of nowhere and zipped past us like that was its job. And that I got a glimpse of it just long enough. I was sitting on the left side of the car and it went by on our left. And I got a glimpse of it. It just kind of imprinted. And it wasn't until years and years and years later that I figured out that that was a BMW R bike, you know, with the horizontally opposed cylinders that stick out the front. And so that kind of engine format imprinted on me at an early age. But when I started riding, I started with, you know, early 70s Kawasaki triples. And I very quickly latched on to the Honda CB750 as my motorcycle of choice. This is probably the very late 80s, early 90s. I started riding, and it was just casual. I usually had a bike that didn't work. So I was constantly trying to figure it out. I'd lose carburetor springs doing a rebuild and, you know, not be able to ride it for 6 months or whatever. But it wasn't really in my blood. You know, I didn't need it. I mostly drove my car. But then I went on a cross country trip with a buddy of mine, Jason, and at the time we both had Suzuki Bandits. This was 2001. I had a 1200. He had a 600. And my buddy that lived in San Francisco that was letting us stay with him took us to a party or had a party at his house or something. And one of the guys had gotten liquored up, and he was like, listen, I can't ride my bike home. Can somebody ride my bike and give me a ride home? I was like, yeah, sure. I'm not drunk. I hadn't been drinking that night. I wasn't feeling too terribly well. So I gave him a ride home with him sitting on the back. which in San Francisco, if they ride on the back, they call that riding Betty. So what we call it other places, they don't use that term. They call it riding Betty.
The other B word.
Yeah, the other B word. But it was a 1995 R1100 GS. It was black. It was sleek. It was beautiful. I had never recognized, been aware of the modern BMWs. And that bike was so smooth and it was so comfortable and it just felt perfect under me. That I decided right then and there, when I got home, I was going to sell my Suzuki Bandit and I was going to buy me an R1100 GS. As luck turns out, I crashed my Bandit in Oregon. Me and my buddy got run off the road by an RV, totaled the bike. I got home. I bought myself an R1100 GS, and I've been riding BMWs ever since.
And that really is, you really literally almost started on BMW. Because usually most people, unless they buy something a lot older and fix it up, new bikes for a lot of riders that are young and just starting out, BMWs are kind of expensive, right?
Yeah, they are. And even back then, I think my first one I got used. I bought it from a dude in South Carolina. I met him halfway in North Carolina to take it out of his truck and put it in mine. It had 92,000 miles on it, and I think I paid $4,000 for it. It was a lot of money for a bike with almost 100,000 miles on it. But that was a bargain, at the time.
Yeah, what's funny is the first motorcycle I purchased myself was in late 83, early 84, maybe early 84, was a CB 1100F, and that bike sold new for $3,800.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you bought a bike with 100,000 miles. I mean, I'm not in any way, shape, or making a statement that BMWs were overpriced at the time, because you got a lot of motorcycle at the time. I remember before I bought the Honda, I stood and looked in the dealership window at 441 Cycles at the R100 RS and like drooled over it. I mean, they literally said, "Stop drooling on the bike, get out of the store."
Well, and one of the cool things about BMW, and I know I sound like I've drunk the Kool-Aid, and maybe I have to a certain extent, is that if you can afford to buy a new BMW, you are buying the cutting edge of motorcycle technology, no matter what model you get. They were the first to put ABS across their line on motorcycles.
Wait a second. Hold on a minute here. You're trying to tell me that Harley Davidson's not the cutting edge?
Harley Davidson's, I like the company Harley. I don't like their motorcycles. They don't seem to fit me very well. They do seem to have some pretty advanced technology, but as long as you're going to continue to commit to air-cooled engines where one cylinder is out of the airflow, to me, come on.
Listen, that comment was 100% scripted and staged for the benefit of our buddy Ted. So, you starting like you started probably allowed you to understand the benefits of owning a motorcycle like that on an early basis, where some people, it takes them a while. And there's some people that'll never get to that level where they want to spend that much money on a new motorcycle. To them, it's like, that's crazy. That's more than a car.
Yeah.
Especially when you get in the upper, like the K1600s or the RT or the GS, even the GS Adventure. Like, you look at the price tag of a fully
that's
loaded
car
one.
money, isn't it?
Yeah, I can buy a car, but for those of us that travel or, like Scott, commute a lot, we tend to maybe look for something that's going to last a little bit longer or just has more creature comfort, And when you say drinking the Kool-Aid too, Wes, we all kind of have at some point some sort of brand loyalty. I mean, I used to say that I bled Honda Red, but then I kind of tried other stuff, and when I rode the KTM, now I drink the KTM Kool-Aid. But believe me, if I would not shy away from owning a BMW. I like them a lot. Yeah,
and I kind of lost what I was going to say.
Triumph.
I've got two different BMWs right now. One's an R1200 GS, which still has the horizontally opposed engines, the oil-cooled version. They call it a hex head. So it was the kind of the first leap into the 21st century with CAN bus and a lot of computer technology. But I also own what they call a K bike. It's a K1200 RS. And at the time, that was a pancake 4-cylinder engine. It was longitudinal. So as the stroke went, the firing chamber or whatever, the combustion chamber is on the left side of the motorcycle, and the crank is on the right. So it's a weird engine as far as an inline four goes, and it's sometimes weird to ride the two bikes back to back, especially when I had an 1100 GS that was the same year as my K bike, because the controls are the same. The hand grips and the brake lever and the clutch lever and all that kind of stuff. The pedals are the same feel, but the two bikes are so diametrically opposed. The K1200 RS was a sport touring bike that would, you'd wear your tires out from one side of the country to the other because you could just cross it that quickly. I mean, those bikes are just amazing. My K bike had so much potential to get me in trouble that I hung a 300-pound sidecar off the side of it just to slow me down. So it sometimes boggles me a little bit that one company can produce two completely different motorcycles like that. But then Honda does the same thing. You got the Goldwing with its 6-cylinder engine, but you've also got the Africa Twin.
Right. And that's the one thing about Harley is when you're kind of stuck in that mold of one engine type. KTM too. All the big bikes are the same motor.
Yep.
That's why I've always liked the selection that companies like Triumph and BMW and the Japanese manufacturers, where if you're a cruiser guy, you can get a cruiser. Even Triumph makes a power cruiser.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
So, is it the Rocket or something?
Yeah, the Rocket. That's a cool bike. I've ridden one. It wasn't really my cup of tea for ownership of a motorcycle, but I had a lot of fun riding. It was like when I rode the Ducati Diavel. I convinced myself before riding it, I'm not going to like this, And then I got off of it. I remember I was in Daytona, and because Alonzo Bowden has always talked about, he's big into power cruisers, right?
Yeah.
I texted him right after. I'm like, now I get it, because that was so much fun riding that bike. But it would be another one I'm going to add to my, wish list stable of motorcycles in the garage I'd like to have. It was a cool bike. So I understand, having this wide range to choose from. Nothing's going to fit everybody. And
right.
We always joke and make fun of the Harley guys and stuff like that. But honestly, Harley Davidson makes a beautiful motorcycle now, especially.
Absolutely.
The fit and finish on our Harley Davidson is incredible. And it's just not, the riding position's not there for me. And Scott knows we've gone to dealerships and stuff together and looked at them, and they're just not comfortable for me to sit on for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does factory paint better than Harley Davidson.
No.
Sorry, Scott, we're gonna get to you. All right,
no,
relax.
Well, and he does make a point. Triumph is a smaller brand. They have a ton of name recognition. They're iconic. But when I think of Triumph, I really only think of the Bonneville. I forget that Triumph has dual sport bikes, and they have sport bikes, and they have sport touring bikes, and they have that cruiser. And, I even have a Triumph dealership in my city that I stop in to get oil and stuff, and just hang around in a motorcycle shop because that's fun. And I see them all, but the only one I really kind of identify as a capital T Triumph is the Bonneville. Right.
Yeah. And that's their iconic motorcycle. And they, the Bonnie now you can get a bunch of different variations, which sometimes it's even hard to keep track of them. Like I know Scott knows the difference between all of them, but it wasn't until very recently I didn't even realize that the cranks were different on some of the models. Now I don't know, Scott, are they all the same now, or do they still offer the different cranks in the Bonnie series?
Talking about that 270 degree?
Yeah,
they're not all like that, no.
So some still have the ones where the cylinders are moving at the same time, correct?
Yeah, because they have the bikes that start with the word street, like Street Cup and Street Twin and all that, and they're downsized. They're like 700cc, 800cc, somewhere in that box. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of I don't know what's the right word for. I don't mean to sound derogatory, but it's like a
mid-sized.
Mid-sized entry level. I don't know.
Yeah, mid-sized bike.
Yeah, I mean, I don't say starter because I wouldn't mind owning one, right? But they're not their big bike. It's not their huge bikes, and I don't think those are 270-degree cranks. But
they even sound different too because of the firing order. And I know very little about. Chris knows a lot about those too because he did a bunch of research before he bought his. But I'm sure we're probably getting some messages on the YouTube channel about it, because I know there's some people. I want to give a shout out to Best Motorcycle Roads TV is on right now, and they're checking it out.
Cool.
But,
yeah, I just saw the little live icon in the top right corner there.
Yeah, we'll get some hecklers. If usually there's a couple guys that do this goofy YouTube channel. I don't know, Eamon Moto or something, that's always heckling us. So how did you get into podcasts, Wes? How'd that happen?
Well, it's kind of funny. A few years ago, when AIM Expo was still down in Orlando, I got a buddy down there named Scott who was just getting into motorcycles in a big way. So we had an extra press pass because somebody in our organization didn't show up. So I asked Scott if he wanted to come up to the AIM Expo on one of the press days, if he could get a day off work, and I'd get him a press pass to get in. And he took me up on that, and I changed the name from the guy that didn't show up to his name. And he came up and he introduced me to this dude, Steve, who was a podcaster doing this thing called the Cafe Racer Podcast. And at that point, the only podcast I listened to was Wait, Don't Tell Me. And only when I couldn't listen to it live on Saturdays. And, that I didn't really get into the world of podcasting until then. And Scott said, you got to meet this guy, Steve. And you and I met, and we shook hands and talked for a few minutes. And then we both went on and did our things. And when I got home, I subscribed to the Cafe Racer Podcast. And I was like, this is really cool. A couple of guys sitting around talking about motorcycles. But I started looking around for other motorcycling podcasts, and have been in and around the world of journalism for most of my life at this point. I was hardcore into journalism in college, and for about 5 years after, maybe close to 10 years. I worked on the college newspaper. We published twice a week. It was, I wrote articles for local newspapers and had pictures that ran in local newspapers and things like that. And with the MOA, certainly I get to kind of exercise my motorcycle journalism muscles from time to time. So I started checking out, the podcast and looking for something that was a little more journalistic. I really love the conversational style of Cafe Racer Podcast. I think it's actually, it's one of the only ones that I've listened to constantly, and the other ones kind of float in and float out as my interest waxes and wanes. But what I was looking for was a motorcycle podcast that was a little more journalistic, a little more topical, from that kind of industry standpoint. I came across Adventure Rider Radio, which was a little more of the format that I was kind of interested in, but still, doesn't have kind of the journalistic aspect to it. And as much as I like Adventure Rider Radio, that host is fantastic. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Jim, I think something.
Yeah, Jim.
Fantastic show. I love that he's a great interviewer, but it's so heavily adventure rider focused that I wanted to keep looking. And so I kept looking, and I kept looking for something that crossed the whole industry, and I just couldn't find it. So I just decided to do it myself. I figured because of my affiliation with the MOA, I have access to a lot of people in the industry who, frankly, if some random podcaster called him up and said, "Hey, I want to interview you on my show," they'd be like, "Get out of here, buddy. I don't know who you are. Click." But I can say, this is Wes with the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. Would you be willing to be interviewed for a podcast? And at least I get an email back. They want to talk to me. Well, what do you want to talk about? What's the format of the show? And that kind of thing. So it really gives me good access. And I've only had a couple of people turn me down. Harley being one of them. Harley has turned me down 4 times, which I understand. But
but I don't know, Wes. I don't agree. What's there to understand? It's free advertising for them. That's what I don't get. I think some of these manufacturers don't understand the power of this medium. Why would they turn you down? For what reason?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. I made a contact with Harley either last year or the year before at the AIM Expo. And I had some questions for him. during about the V-Rod, when the V-Rod was finally canceled once and for all. And I, got his permission to use a quote from him on the air. I didn't record the quote. I read the quote myself. He had sent it in email. And I followed up with their marketing department when they announced their electric motorcycle project, because I am absolutely besotted with the concept of electric motorcycles. I really think that's going to be a huge thing in the future.
Ditto.
And to have a manufacturer the size and reputation of Harley Davidson say, we're putting out an electric motorcycle in 2019. We're going to do this. We're going to make it happen. I think that's amazing. And I want to talk to them about it. I want them to be able to talk to the world about it. And, I don't know why they tell me no, but I keep trying. Every couple of months, I send their marketing folks an email, and I either don't hear back from them, or they politely say maybe some other time, we're not ready to talk about this yet. But yeah, I don't understand.
Unless that's some sort of a corporate decision that comes from the very highest level of Harley Davidson, I don't get, you cannot get on TV for free.
Right.
And I know Harley Davidson does television ads, certainly, especially during motorcycle programming, like a race or something like that. But you're not going to get on traditional radio for free. This doesn't cost them a dime, and we're not really. I don't know if they think we're going to ask for something. We're not. We just want to get information out to the people that ride like us.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to connect people sometimes to guys like you. So somebody that listens to us that has a BMW that doesn't know that Chasing Horizons even exists, I want them to be able to know, hey, there's a BMW centric podcast out there. That's our sole existence. And really the truth is we're just two guys who like to ride and like to talk about motorcycles.
Right.
So this gives us a format to talk about motorcycles. Jim Martin's show is absolutely incredible, and Jim's got a radio background, and you can tell the way he produces it in his voice. And Jim goes after advertisers. He's got sponsors to help him pay for the show. Crash and I don't do that because look what happened. We had a lapse from the 19th of April till now because we've got lives. So we appreciate when we get sponsorship from people, but that's not our focus. And I don't know. And Harley Davidson, maybe they think that you're going to invite them on the show and say, "Oh, by the way, this is advertorial. You're going to have to pay a sponsorship." But I don't know if you've ever told them, "Hey, look, I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to come on and talk about the product." Sometimes I also think that maybe they feel like they're going to be asked tough questions. I don't know.
Yeah, and I've had a couple of I had an engineer from Castrol on one of the episodes that I put out in this May 2018, and that was probably the most corporate kind of experience that I had. Castrol is owned by BP, which is a massive international corporation. So even and Castrol advertises with the MOA. So I had a contact, I could talk to my advertising guy. I sent him an email and said, "Hey, Chris, I want to get a hardcore person that knows about oil on the show. Castrol just came on with us. They're doing this promotion for, whatever it was, 25% off their new line of oil. Can you talk to them and see if they'll give me somebody to be on the podcast?" And one of their PR folks reached out to me, and it never came up. I think the guy got it. It never came up, but I was prepared to say, I don't do monitored interviews. I want to talk to an engineer, and I want him to be on the phone, the computer, and I want to ask him the questions that I want to ask him. I'm happy to tell you the direction that I'm going to try and take him, the things that I want to talk about. I have an idea, a concept for the show, but I was at the same time, I was also happy to say, is there anything specific that you want me to talk about? I want to make sure that they're happy with the experience so that I can get them back again. So where I'm not going to ask them for money, I'm not going to ask them for product. I am willing to say, let's pump your product. Everybody's got something to sell. And with I've had, other than Scott, I've probably had, 2 or 3 or 4 people on my show that are just motorcycle riders. They're not really part of the industry. They've just done something I think is interesting and I think other people would want to know about. But anytime I interview somebody that's part of the industry, I always ask them, what do you want to talk about? So that that they feel like they're getting some value out of that time, that hour and a half that they spend with me. They get a little bit of return on investment in that. And it was really cool. You know, one of the guys that I have on the show was Rod Copes from Royal Enfield USA. He used to work for Harley, and now he heads up Royal Enfield's subsidiary in the US. And he got it. He was one of those industry guys that got it. He was like, yeah, let's talk about motorcycles, man. Let's have a good time. And I tried to make sure that I presented him with the opportunity to talk about his product as much as possible. I timed the interview for the release of the Himalayan in the US on purpose so that we could talk about the Himalayan and make it topical and hopefully, you know, get more people interested in Royal Enfield. And that's kind of so to kind of pull it around full circle, that's the reason that I got into podcasting, is because, you know, I want to bring a little bit of a journalistic approach to a motorcycle podcast, because I think that's something that people will be interested in.
Yeah, and that format, we don't do that. You know, you and I were talking before the show about how the show's format runs, and we just wing it, and it seems to work well for me and Chris because of the dynamic that we have. But I like the format that you use. I like the format that some of the other shows use, where they've got a kind of set format and they've got stuff ready to go. When we do an interview, it's the same thing. We'll talk to the person beforehand and say, what do you want to talk about? But we always end up talking about personal stuff. How you got started riding, you know, what makes you like this? And then we talk about products. And I think for all of us, every show's got a little bit different flavor. And now that the YouTube market's becoming bigger, and there's shows like Scott's where you get the advantage of having, you know, the visceral approach too, because nobody wants to sit for an hour and watch guys talking into a mic or staring at their webcam.
Right.
You know, I think they might turn on just to go, what does that dude look like? You know, and then they shut it off. But the industry as a whole needs to, and I hate saying this, but I'll give you an example. I think we need to be treated better, and I'll tell you why. So you know how they have at AIM, there's media day, correct? And we're all running around doing our thing. You know, we do live interviews at AIM, and they get a lot of watches on YouTube. I remember going into a vendor's booth to talk to a vendor who I'd made an appointment with ahead of time, you know, during that day. And the representative from the company was talking to one of the writers for one of the magazines. And all through my time, like I just sat there patiently waiting, and they just talked to this writer from the magazine, who's a big name. You know, look at what's happened to the motorcycle magazines.
Yeah.
Right. They're granted, they're still producing content online, but the magazines themselves are getting thinner and thinner. And now I think one of them, Cycle World, maybe has gone to a every 2-month format. So they're only publishing.
They went quarterly.
Okay. But we're out here, and a lot of guys like you and Scott are producing content on a regular basis and getting more and more of an audience. So I think there's going to be a time when they kind of look at it and like, hey, these guys over here in the corner, these podcasters that really are amateurs, it doesn't cost us anything to get on that show and talk about what we're doing. I almost feel like we get treated a little bit like public radio. You know,
that's a good comparison. I think you're absolutely right. You know, and I know that at least early on in my podcast's history, which is only, you know, not even a whole year yet, I got in to talk to people, to even talk to them about being on the show, because the MOA puts out a magazine that has a subscriber base of 30,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know that some of the folks would have talked to me without that behind me. But up to this point, you know, none of my interviews have appeared as content in the magazine. I had a guy called Mark Barnes that writes for Motorcycle Consumer News. I talked to him as a source for an article that turned into an interview that was on the podcast. That was kind of the other way around. And that's kind of the only exception, but that wasn't planned that way. But, you know, the great thing is that my bosses there aren't pressuring me to turn these interviews into magazine content. They really look at the podcast as a separate media thing that, like you said, is this new thing that is going to be a different avenue, an additional avenue of content as the magazine world continues to shift and change.
So a question for both of you guys. Do you think that the print media, in to a greater extent, what they've morphed into with online, do you think that they look at the podcasts as competition?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I know, like, Motorcyclist has a YouTube channel. I think they probably see something like Revzilla more as a content competitor than podcasters like myself.
Really?
Yeah, because, you know, Revzilla does tons and tons of video content, not just product reviews, but
yeah, they have a full production department. They
do. And they put out great videos about, you know, this, that, and the other, working on your bike, this new bike, that new bike, just fantastic videos.
Have you noticed
when you say that you think that the print industry is more threatened by Revzilla than you, honestly, what's the difference other than scale, right? They're doing what you do on a bigger scale with more money and more, you know, wider content, more hosts and everything, Wes, but they're doing what both of you guys do, really, and kind of what I do, but I'm on a tiny scale, right? And if print isn't threatened by streaming based content, they should be.
Yeah.
I don't look at any print media at all, period. And I love motorcycles. I'm addicted to motorcycles day and night. I don't ever hold a piece of paper that was printed by somebody to communicate to me about motorcycles, ever.
Yeah, that's really funny that you say that, because I used to be a big consumer of print. Like, I had a ton of magazine subscriptions, and just not motorcycle. They were the other things I was into, diving and shooting. And you know what, Scott, now that I think about it, you're right. Like, even Wes, I got the 3-month trial for BMW MOA, and I haven't read through a total one of those. You know, like, I'll peruse through, maybe see an article and read it, but I'm like Scott, is like, I
don't think their industry is going to die. I don't think, they just need to shift. They just need to start providing the same content they do today in a newspaper or a magazine in a streaming format that people can watch on their phones or on their laptops or whatever, on their Apple TV or whatever, on their Chromebox. Like, the only exposure I have to, for example, motorcycle news is when the YouTube channel Missenden Flyers sits down and he goes through the newspaper with me, and I watch somebody else talk about what he read in the paper, right? And that's kind of funny, but, you know, they're not going to die. They just...
you cut out.
Concept. Am I dying?
Yeah, for a second you did.
Glitched out for a second.
These same content that they provide today via print, they just need to shift and provide it.
That's a great point. That's a great point, because you can't read a newspaper on a motorcycle traveling cross country, but I'll listen to 6 podcasts. You know?
Yeah, and I'm old school. You know, I still have magazine subscriptions. After Cycle World changed their format, I actually resubscribed to them. I'd let my subscription lapse because I didn't like it anymore. They did a big redesign a few years ago, and they turned into what I for a while called the Maxim magazine of motorcycles, where it was just, and I'm not saying that they were, you know, exploiting sexual imagery or anything like that. It got very slick, but it also got very shallow. And I think one of the things that they're doing with their reboot, their quarterly reboot, is they've gone back to some more in-depth content, which I really appreciate. But I'm trying to think about it. I subscribe to several magazines, including 2 that come from England. So, you know, I pay an upcharge for those for the airmail. I read the newspaper every day. I read the Richmond Times-Dispatch every day. I'm still kind of old school. But I also look at a bunch of online magazines. You know, I read Cycle News every week, and I look at a magazine called Rust, which is a little more aimed at off-road stuff. There's ADV Moto magazine, which is put out by Carl Parker, which is an absolutely fantastic magazine that was all digital for several years. He saved it from disappearing off the face of the earth and resurrected it as an online-only magazine. And it's only been the last maybe 3 years or so that he started putting out a print edition as well. But, you know, it's been hard for me to make the transition from print to all digital, because I think probably because I work in front of a computer sometimes 6 or 7 days a week. So when I want to relax, I don't want to do it in front of my computer. I don't want to look at my phone for entertainment. I want a magazine.
Right.
I love now that YouTube has an app on the Apple TV, because now I will actually watch YouTube videos on a pretty regular basis, because I can sit in my chair, turn it on my TV, and relax away from my computer. So it doesn't feel like I'm constantly at the computer working, and then being entertained as well.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I watch a lot of YouTube content on television. Do you got either one of you guys use like stuff like this, like Newsstand on the iPhone?
No.
You can get, so like I have all these subscriptions that I pay for on here. So Motorcycle Consumer News, Roadrunner, Motorcyclist, Cycle World, Adventure Motorcycle, Off-Road South Africa, which is kind of a cool magazine, Off-Road and Adventure South Africa, and then Rider Magazine. And I realized recently I haven't looked at one of these in a long time.
Yeah.
Like you, I don't want to sit there. I'll read some news articles on the phone, but I don't know. I just keep.
I'll tell you guys a good
back to
example,
YouTube.
right? I just thought of this. Here's a good example of what I'm talking about, right? Motorcycle News calls itself the world's biggest, whatever, print purveyor of motorcycle print news or something. I don't read them, but I do subscribe to their YouTube channel, and they have a YouTube channel, and
It's free.
Yeah, and it's cool, and there's a lot of cool motorcycle racing stuff on there, and there's a lot of cool stuff on there, and I think this is just one guy's opinion, but I think slowly but surely all of the content that they continue to put out on paper is going to shift over to other streaming type outlets like their YouTube channel, or maybe they'll have a Motorcycle News. Maybe they already have a Motorcycle News app for the Apple TV or something, right?
Well, and Scott, do you think that it's going to be driven by the people that consume the content, or is it going to be driven by the advertisers who stop advertising in print magazines?
I don't know. I don't know. Let me put it this way, okay? I got 6 kids. You guys know I have 6 kids.
Yeah.
And the oldest one's 24, the youngest one's 14. They don't read newspapers.
No.
Okay. And 10 years from now, they're going to be 24 to 34, and they're not going to be picking up magazines.
Which probably means their kids aren't going to be picking up magazines either.
See, I was just thinking about that, Wes. You and I came up about the same time in motorcycling, when the only thing we had were magazines.
Yep.
So we got a lot of our information. I mean, when I bought the V-Strom, I had never heard of it until I saw there was an article about standard motorcycles, like in Motorcyclist magazine, and they had a picture of one of the guys standing up on the seat of a V-Strom. So, and Scott, we'll kind of segue into Scott, because your story is a little different than Wes and I. So tell us how you started off motorcycling.
Well, it was 2 weeks ago.
It's pretty damn close.
I think I've kind of reviewed it already. When Doug and I were on your channel before, it's a pretty short story. I kind of wanted to focus more on Wes because of his podcast.
Yeah,
stuff,
but it's going to bring me to a point. It's going to bring me to a point.
So, basically speaking, 2.5 years ago, something like that, I blew up the engine in my car and started looking for a replacement. And the guys in my office are all motorcycle guys, and they just be getting a motorcycle. And so for the past 2 years and 3 months or something like that, I've just only ridden a motorcycle. Started on a 250, rode it for a year, bought the Triumph 1200. Been riding that for a year and something. And
when you bought your first motorcycle, Scott, did you walk into the local dealer and say, "Hey, show me motorcycles," or did you pick up a magazine or start reading articles? How did you research your first bike?
I picked my first bike because I wanted the same bike I had taken the Motorcycle Safety Foundation class on. So it's not super typical for most people, but it was the only bike I'd ever sat on. I took the class 2 days, 11 miles around a parking lot, and I said, I'll take this 250 again. And I went and found one of those, but I did a lot of research leading up to get the class, and I did a lot of reading and got sort of a hyper accelerated immersion in motorcycles, but it never was any of it on paper. If that's what you're kind of driving at, it was exactly all online.
Yeah.
Online.
Yeah. Because you came to the party late. You probably got the advantage of being able to do a lot more research than Wes and I did, because Wes and I, the only thing we could find was what was on the newsstand. And back then it was limited. There was 2 choices. It was Cycle World and Motorcyclist, right?
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of, Wes and I both came up through the music, world at the same time in the 80s, and got into guitars pretty much together. Wes and I go back being friends for 30 years. And so we both got into guitars back when the only way you could learn about guitars was, buy a Guitar Player magazine, or sit around a guitar store and talk to people and hear stories, and half of it's true.
Yeah.
And so I assume, you know, in the late 80s, early 90s for motorcycles, the same thing, right? Buy magazines and sit around bike shops and hear stories from guys and try to sort out what's true and what's not true.
Right. Right. And it was very, depending on what dealership you were in, you know, it was very partisan.
Sure.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and you know, I really gotta give Scott some props, you know, because I don't know that I was the only motorcycle rider that he knew when he decided to look at that, but we talked on the phone, and he sent me emails, and he sent me links, and what do you think about this? And I was really impressed that he went out and bought that 250, that little Suzuki 250, because it is so tempting to get into that pattern, to get into a dealership, and the first bike that the salesman puts you on is, you know, a leader bike, a sport bike of some sort. Or, you know, you look at the bikes that your friends are riding, and they're riding, you know, 1200 cc cruisers, or they're riding a 1200 GS or a 1290 KTM or whatever. And to think, you know, if I don't have a bike that's 1000 cc's or more, I'm just not a real motorcycle rider. And you completely ignored all of that kind of stuff, and you went with what you were comfortable with and what you wanted right out of the gate. And then you stuck with it. You stuck with it for a year before you started looking at other bikes. And I will always remain impressed by that, because I think it is such an intelligent way to approach not just the sport of motorcycling, but the day-to-day commuting, living with my motorcycle aspects of being a motorcycle rider. Scott, I'm just really, I got to give you a lot of props on that.
I feel the same way, and I also think it's made Scott a better rider.
Oh, 100% agree.
Yeah.
At the same time, you know, part of that year on a 250 was learning in what ways my friends were right when they said, man, you should get like a 750 or something. You should start on a 750. You know, when we go on group rides around Lake Okeechobee together, and you can't even pass old lady in a Lexus, you know, you realize, yeah, they had a point when they said the 250 is going to be slow, you know, but for commuting back and forth to work through rush hour traffic, yeah, it was great. It was awesome. It was like riding a little dirt bike around. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it does have its downsides, you know.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I think middleweight, you know, I hate the term starter bike, because I think a lot of guys that are riding leader plus bikes should go back to a middleweight and would have a much better time riding, because like Scott mentioned, in traffic, especially in South Florida, if they're not going anywhere, the leader bike's overkill, and a lot of them, they're too big, you know, they're too fast. They're not really having an enjoyable experience. I hate that term starter bike. You know, because I don't believe
perfect example, Steve. A perfect example is our friend Jed's, right? From Jed's. Oh, I'm rocking my Jed's Moto t-shirt, by the way.
Yes, you are. I noticed that.
So our buddy Justin up in Vermont, I mean, he's been riding motorcycles, you know, forever, and has a ton. I think he's got 100,000 miles experience or something, and he's not even 40, right? But in addition to all the big bikes he has a 250. He has the same 250. That's actually where I met him. I met him on the forum for the TU 250, and that's so he takes that bike and bombs all over the place, all over the mountains of Vermont, right up and down the Green Mountains, having a great time, because with that tiny little engine, you can wring it out and just blast it at the top of the rev limiter and have a great time, and not, you know, you're not going 200 miles an hour. And he's a guy who's got experience with big bikes, right? And he's currently riding the same Triumph that I'm riding now, but he'll get on that little 250 and blast all over these little towns in Vermont having a good time. It's not a starter bike. It's just a little bike.
No, and there's some little bikes out there that'll scare the bejesus out of you. You get on any older 250 that's a two-stroke, you know, like an RS 250 or a 250R, they'll scare the crap out of you. Those aren't for, you know, there's no way you're going to call that a beginner bike or a starter bike.
No way.
Especially in places where it's really twisty. Like anybody that goes to deals and, you know, the Dragon, and sits there and watches these big bikes like braking hard or like running off the side of the road, and then you watch these guys on middleweights, especially like supermoto bikes, and they're just having a blast. They're like screaming through the corners, having so much fun. Yeah, it's I tend to agree with both of you guys, and I think part of the fault of this is the dealers as well too. I personally believe that if they move people to start on a middleweight bike, they would make more sales and reoccurring sales, because a lot, even if it's like the new stable of 300s that are coming out, like a guy wants a sport bike, and I'm not picking on a particular type of person, but this guy that's like 5'6", 5'7", $120, you know, in good shape, walks in. I want to get my first motorcycle. If I was the guy in a you know, the traditional 4-brand Japanese bike store, I'd be saying, hey, look at this new Cowie that just came out. That's a 300. This thing's a lot of fun. It's not going to kill you in the pocketbook. You may even be able to pay cash for it. And that guy probably in a year and a half coming back as an experienced rider who had a lot of fun, like, I'm ready to move up. And that guy at that point might go, you know what? I'm going to stick with a 600 or a 750 because that's going to be the bike for me. I've always argued that these middleweight sport bikes, the people that say, well, I'm not going to get a 600. I need an 1100 or a 1200. They haven't ridden that 600 to its full capacity at all. Guaranteed.
Yeah.
Well, and I think your average everyday rider can maybe only wring out about 70% of a motorcycle's capability, just because, you know, the motorcycle has more capability than most riders, including myself, have skill.
I think it's less than that, honestly. I really do.
You think?
Yeah, I do. I think they're limited by, number one, where they're riding. So you're not going to get the full potential of a motorcycle on the street at all unless you take it on the track. And I think, too, I just don't think people have the skill set to ride the bike at its close to 70% capacity. I know I'm not riding the KTM like that, because you're limited. Even look, I learned a big lesson too off-road when I hear guys talk about lighter bikes. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about not running around on 800 pounds of motorcycle off-road.
Yeah, I'm not much of an off-road rider. As a matter of fact, I'm not an off-road rider. But when I decided that I wanted to get into a little bit of off-road riding, I looked at my R1200 GS and I thought, no.
What's it like to pick this up?
And I've picked it up a couple of times off the ground by myself, and it is not fun. So what I did is I talked to a bunch of people and I did a little bit of research, and I lucked out in that a friend of mine had a KTM 990 Adventure that he was looking to get rid of. And he had set it up for long haul traveling, but I thought, you know, here's a bike that's nice and narrow. It's got that V-twin in it. It's narrow. If I took off the Jesse bags and ditched the top case, it would be a pretty light bike, relatively speaking. And, you know, so that's the avenue I pursued to even think about getting into any kind of light off-road riding, was to go narrower and lighter.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's a really good off-road bike is the Bonneville Triumph. Bonneville.
Yeah, I've seen some of those videos, Scott, where you just tear right through the sand, and you know the guys on the adventure bikes are going, "Don't do that! Don't do that! You'll never make it."
Doug and I were like watching him one day. We stopped on the corner of a road. We were doing a ride, a pretty long ride, and there was just like patch of sugar sand that connected these two roads together. And well, Doug and I are like, you know, debating the tire choices and how to ride sugar span. All of a sudden, Doug goes, well, there goes Scott. And he's on his phone, you're riding through the sand, you know, I'm like, oh boy, guy makes you look bad every time.
Well, and you know, I know a little bit of Scott's history with the car and the getting into the bike, but so here's something that I've wanted to ask you, Scott.
Yes, I will marry you.
Are you? Thank you, and I appreciate that. I'll be sure to break it to Deb gently. Are you more diligent about the maintenance of your bikes than you were about your car?
Oh yeah. Well, remember, like I said, I blew up my engine on my car.
Well, but you didn't blow it up. You didn't blow it up by being a hooligan. You weren't out, you know, running 90 miles an hour in first gear.
When you say maintenance, you're talking about like scheduled maintenance type stuff, or
yeah, you know, like, you know, keeping your chain lubricated and adjusted properly, and changing your oil, and, you know, checking your steering head bearings and getting new tires and all that kind of stuff.
I had to learn how to do all that stuff. Yeah. And it's like, okay, if the car breaks down, you're not gonna crash and die, right? But if the bike breaks because you didn't maintain something, I mean, that could happen.
Yeah.
You know, if the chain link breaks or something while you're riding, or all the things you're mentioning, I mean, if you're not paying attention to your bearings and stuff, yeah, it can hurt you really badly, you know?
I'll never forget the first time I changed a chain, put a chain on my own bike. I rode for probably 3 weeks, just shaking and jumping at every little noise. Is that the chain going? Did I break the chain? Did I break the chain?
Right.
Yeah, because and I still have a hard time with clip type master links, even though I've ridden probably tens of thousands of miles on bikes that had clip type master links, but still to this day. So I'm a little nervous about having the KTM just because it has a chain, and I've been running drive shafts for so long. But
well, Wes, just to compound the nervousness and the, I don't want to say paranoia, but the extreme awareness of it, right? Just wait until your daughter has a bike.
Oh,
right. Because my oldest son bought a bike, I want to say 3 months ago, something like that. 2 months ago.
Very long.
No, he got himself a little Kawasaki Ninja 650, and I'm like constantly looking at it, and let's just check out this chain. Let's see this tension. Let's more than my own bike, because it's your kid.
Yeah.
I meant to ask you, how's he doing, Scott, on the bike?
He's doing great. He's doing awesome. Yeah, he goes off for rides in the evenings when he gets home from work, or on Saturday he'll take it out. He's just enjoying himself. I'm not pushing him to ride with me or anything like that. We've been on a couple rides together, but he's, he'll go to the movies by himself and watch movies. What is that movie pass thing these guys have now where you can watch a movie a day? You pay like $12 a month and you can watch one movie per day. So I don't know what that thing is, but
that doesn't seem economically advisable for the company.
Yeah, I don't ask me about it. I think all the kids are into it. They all have this subscription where you go watch a movie for a day for $12 or something.
Yeah, I never heard of that. So we're getting some comments, and I got some really good feedback here from the guys that are on the live chat on YouTube. And I've got Chris from Best Motorcycle Roads and a guy, Hal Pollard. And these guys, Chris brought up a good point too. The content, especially for me being a photography-based person, the content in the print media is nicer. Like, in other words, the photography is beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you look at magazines like Iron and Air, and the new motorcyclists, and both of these guys really like that a lot. The new specialty print magazines, and like Wes, you'd mentioned at Adventure and ADV Moto, their feel to their magazine is really nice. I like actually, holding that thing, but
absolutely.
Yeah, maybe that's the direction that they'll go to.
And when you look at their YouTube channels or their video output, it's the same gorgeous shots. It's just video, slowed down, slow motion, beautiful, gorgeous video of bikes going around corners and stuff. Because they still have the same financing to put into their video production that they do to their print production, But
Hal Pollard made a comment that he said the industry shouldn't sleep on the influence of the communities that grow up around podcasts like Cafe Racer Podcast, CTH, Chasing the Horizon, Eamon, Jeds, etc. Yeah, I don't think maybe they're not noticing us yet for some reason. Although I have had some of the reporters and editors when I've met them at AIM seem to be very accepting of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder sometimes if it's when they talk to me, if they're talking to me because of the podcast or if they're talking to me because of the MOA. And kind of early on, I decided I just don't care, because,
right.
One of the things that I really wanted to do with club style organizations are having a hard time, just like magazines are. And, one of the things we talk about in the MOA a lot is how to expand our membership into people that are under 50 and even more importantly, under 40, because those are the people that become your lifetime members that sustain the organization into the future. But people under 40, people under 30 don't approach motorcycles the way that we did when we were that age. They don't approach motorcycle content the same way that we did. And I think that one of the important places that podcasting holds is it's kind of going to serve as a bridge between the old world of motorcycle content and the new world. I think that the future of motorcycle information, motorcycle content is probably not what we're doing, but they're not going to get there without us. You know what I mean? And I know that sounds ego. Sounds like I'm giving myself more importance than I have, but I really do think that we're in an important place right now in the development, the evolution of motorcycling content.
No, and I think you're right. I do. And I think people like the Motorcycle Industry Council gets it because, Larry Little from AIM has made the rounds of the podcast, and he was a great interview. And I certainly think that AIM gets it because we're treated on the exact same level as everybody else.
Yeah.
If not, the red carpet's rolled out for us. And the only thing that, like you said, with podcasts being the bridge, I think there are some people that just skip right us completely and go to, the YouTube channel because they like to be able to see things as well. And I've talked to a lot of people that were consumers of video content on YouTube, and they didn't even know what a podcast was. So I think that because they're running into people like Scott, who talks about podcasts on his show, and they're now starting to, like, maybe, I don't want to use the term go backwards a little bit, but saying, hey, there's another form of delivery of media out here that's really portable. I don't have to be staring at my phone. That's the thing that we're going to do more video eventually, and of course I'm going to make Scott edit all of it for me, but we're starting to carry rigs around, these small rigs like this. We upgraded some of our stuff, and we started off with like a Zoom camera that was okay, great audio quality but crappy video, and now moving to something a little bit more professional looking. But the guys like Scott that can edit really well, that's what drives people to there, and they stay there. And I think Print's figuring that out. I just wish that I don't want to have an adversarial relationship with Print. I don't want to have an adversarial relationship or a competition relationship with anybody, certainly not other podcasters.
Right. Yeah.
I think we've built a really nice community in the podcast world where we're all talk. I don't care if Jim gets a lot of advertising or Todd and Chuck get a great interview, because that's fine. That all helps all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm a little intimidated by video, but I guess partly because I don't understand all of the things that go into it. I've done some videos for my own for the MOA's tech channel. And I look at them and I'm like, well, the lighting is terrible, and it's just it's a fat guy in a crappy motorcycle, kind of thing. But I get a lot of good responses to them. One of the videos, I made a video of I was taking the hubs, I was delacing a pair of wheels actually, that from my KTM. And I did a video. I just put the camera over my shoulder, and that video has been watched more times than any other video I've made. There's no sound in it except for the wrench and the spokes and whatnot. But it boggles me what people get into about video. And I'm really intimidated by the whole thing, so much so that I used to have a pretty decent little video camera, a GoPro. And after a while of farting around with it, I couldn't figure it out. So I just sent it to Scott. I was like, here you go, video camera, enjoy.
Right. I also think it depends on who your audience, like what you're going to target your audience to be. So like when we did the first ride trip, a company called Rottweiler sent Spencer and I a bunch of kits to convert the airbox over on the bike to use a Rottweiler air filter. And I did a 20-minute video where I had 2 cameras set up. The editing sucks on it. It wasn't in a great location. It was in my garage. But I talked a lot about detail work, actually doing the installation on a KTM 1290, and that video still gets tons of hits. I've actually had people email me and say, "Hey, thanks a lot for the help and the pointers. I watched your video." Spencer kind of did the same video for the 690, but it was really short. It was actually produced for like Instagram content. There was no audio other than some, I think maybe they had music running, but it was really quick. And it was pretty informative and kind of cool looking. So it depends on what your audience is going to be on a lot of the video production. I really like the format. Like when we did the cycle pump video, that actual live outdoors, we're on a trip, that I like that a lot better than, and I watch a lot of reviewers videos for photography gear, and you'll have a guy that's sitting in front of his desk at his computer, maybe holding a piece of gear up, and then he's doing cutaways to still shots. That to me, it's just kind of boring. I'd rather see somebody out in the field reviewing a piece of gear live, even camera equipment,
Yeah.
But that's why I really like the type of content that Scott produces with AIM and Moto. And I'd like to do more of that, honestly, Scott, where we do gear reviews and stuff like that, where we're actually out in the field using this stuff. Chris and I did a bunch of stuff where we were talking about gear while we were talking on the comm system, That seemed to work out well as well. Don't have a lot of good video to go with it. There's there's some, we tended to think about it like we do a podcast where you start at point A and end at point B, and it's just, there's no cutting in anything, any audio. We're just doing it live. Whereas I've learned with video, I can actually go shoot some other stuff and then add it in over the soundtrack while we're still talking. It's new for me. Scott's great about that.
There's so many different kinds of levels of I don't want to say quality, but levels of production value on YouTube. And people, you'd be surprised what people will sit still and watch for, right? I mean, there's Brett out there with the Moto Trek channel, which is gorgeous,
fantastic,
amazing production values, right? Always well lit and perfect audio, right? And he's getting tons of views. And then there's videos of guys turning metal on a lathe and milling out something, and it's noisy and kind of crummy lights, and people are sitting watching it. I mean, myself, I'm sitting there watching guys mill stuff on a lathe for some reason, and driving my wife crazy, right? But there's all different. There's so many people watching, especially YouTube, right? There was a article just yesterday said, that YouTube is the millennials' favorite platform, and I don't know if that's really true or not, but there's so much content I look up sometime how many minutes of content are being uploaded to YouTube per minute. It's like mind-boggling.
Yeah, more than anybody could ever consume.
I mean, PewDiePie's playing video games in his underwear, and he's the #1 watched YouTuber, period.
Some of that, the numbers on some of those channels are sick. Like the 2 12-year-old girls that sit there and talk about school, and they're getting 1 million views. It just blows me away, and I'm happy if I get 5,000 on something. It's absolutely incredible. So I think one of the guys on the chat made a comment about public access. Is this the new public access you guys think?
When you guys were talking about we're like public radio or I thought it's more like Wayne's World sometimes, it's more like public access. Okay. Right?
Party on, Wayne.
Right.
Everybody can do it. Anybody can.
Yeah.
I mean, my 14-year-old's got a YouTube channel where a bunch of little stop motion Lego figures do stuff, and he's beating the crap out of me in views.
Right.
Hey, you gotta send me that URL in an email, Scott. I want to check that out.
It's funny. But
no, I think the three of us are doing something very similar and a little bit different. And I think that and I'm glad we're all doing the same thing because I like it all, honestly.
And like you said, it's not a competition. It's not us versus them. It's a big community, right? I mean, Steve, the reason I found the Cafe Racer podcast is through Liza at the Santa Cruz, right? I found them because she was on the Pace, or vice versa. I forget, right? And I found the Pace because I just happened to be stumbling through, I think, a YouTube channel where somebody mentioned it, right? And everybody's friends with everybody. You guys have these big round tables with the Wheel Nerds and all these other guys, right? And it's really cool.
No, and I've had some great discussions with Ted, from what's the name of their podcast? The Harley one that they do.
I don't know.
I'll listen to that show too whenever I can. But he's opened my eyes to a lot of things I didn't really realize from the cruiser community. So there's a lot of shared information where I've learned a lot from a lot of these other guys as well too. I've had conversations with Phil Waters on the phone when I had the Stelvio, or even the current Gucci when I was having problems with it, because Phil knows everything there is to know about him for the most part. And if not, he can guide me in the right direction. So all this is great. And I just wish that maybe the manufacturers would kind of look at it the same way we do, that we're not really going to charge you and we're not really asking for anything. Yeah. I've wanted to test a particular piece of gear and got an answer back from a manufacturer that said, well, how many Twitter subscribers do you have? Like, what difference does that make? Because that's what they base their whole idea of whether or not they're going to send you gear is how many Twitter subscribers.
36.
It's like, I don't, if you want, I'll go out and buy 10,000 because
that's the thing. Exactly.
Yeah. I think they're completely missing the idea. But if I tell them, look, at the time we were getting like 6,000 downloads a show and they really weren't interested. Okay, that's fine. I'm not going to, I'll move on to the next guy. We have a lot of people now that actually will call us and say, I want to send you this to test. We're very open about that. We give a lot of stuff away, when we can. I just wish that, and I'm not even asking to keep gear. Like if they want to send me something to look at, I'll be glad to send it back.
Yeah, I always offer to send stuff back, and the only time I've ever kind of been requested to send something back is when I contacted somebody and said, listen, I don't like this thing that you sent me, so I'm not going to write it, because I don't write negative reviews. I don't write a review that says this thing is a piece of crap and nobody should ever buy it, because I don't want to read that review.
Yeah,
I want to read about what works for you, not what doesn't work, because if it works for you, then I'm going to at least check it out and see if it works for me. But that's the only time I've ever been asked to send something back, is when I really just did not like it, could not write a positive review. And almost every time they would, send me $10 to cover the postage.
Well, I mean, I've sent gear back too. And what we tell everybody is, look, if we have a problem with it, the first thing we're going to do before we talk bad about it is we're going to call you and make sure it wasn't something
Absolutely.
that we did, that we're either setting it up wrong or we didn't know how to use it. But I've given some companies some negative feedback, not greatly, but maybe just said, hey, this one aspect of the product didn't work right. And then I actually had a company which was, I still to this day don't understand it. We did some really great interviews on AIM on a product. I'm not going to talk about what it is, but I got a phone call from the guy that I interviewed, and he's like, look, the owner, the president wants you to take that down. And I'm like, why? And because it was great and it was getting a lot of hits. And he's like, well, he just felt like it didn't fit the style of the company, or that the message that they wanted to send out wasn't there. And the guy that I was talking to gets it. He knew it, understood it from my aspect, but he's like that. So I said, okay, I'll make the videos private. And then maybe a year later, I made them public again, because people were emailing me going, hey, what happened to that video that you had on there when you were talking about this? Because it was some good information on it. And it wasn't anything I did. It was the guy that was the rep from the company at the time was talking. They were great, actually. Good content. And again, another company that just doesn't get it. There's no such thing, in my opinion, as, especially when you're selling something, as bad exposure. Because even if it is something that is controversial, people are going to go look for it anyway, just because it is controversial.
Right. Well, and there's a huge difference between, doing a video or in my case, writing a review that said, I got this helmet and it is a piece of junk. I wouldn't put this on a crash test dummy if you paid me to. There's a big difference between that and saying, I got this helmet and it doesn't work for me because of this, and this. And I probably wouldn't recommend somebody that is in my exact situation buying this helmet, because it probably isn't going to work for them. There's a difference between bashing something and doing a critical investigation of it.
Absolutely. And I think Revzilla is kind of good at that. Like I've actually heard them say, if you're a long oval, this is not going to fit you right.
Mm-hmm. So
I really would rather hear things like that. There's also, I think, especially like I've watched a bunch of videos recently in the photo industry on gear bags, and
I got some I can send you if you're deficient in that area. I got about 90 gear bags that I could send you to try out.
Man, I'm telling you, I'm the same way. I end up collecting stuff because I can't find the one that works the right way.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm that way with motorcycle gloves.
Yeah, that's a very, very personal thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
People have told me, oh, you got to try this glove. And I go and I can't even really, it doesn't work at all for me. It's funny because there's a bicycle shop down here that makes custom bicycles, and they have about 150 saddles on the wall. And you can go out, grab a saddle, ride with it for a while, and then say, no, I don't like this one. They'll give you another one until you find the one you like, and then they sell you a brand new one. I kind of almost wish there was a way to do that with certain types of motorcycle gear, like helmets.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah.
And back up just a second. Did you say custom built bicycles?
Oh yeah, that's
a thing.
Oh, absolutely. My road bike, when I retired from the fire department, I used to road ride a lot. So, think about a motorcycle for a second. Okay. And think about how you can change the geometry on a motorcycle, right? You're not going to really be able to change the head tube angle without cutting and welding, but you can certainly change the length of pull on the bars. You can certainly change rear sets. There's a lot of customization you can do on a motorcycle. So imagine a bike where you have a frame that has set angles on it already, but the stem might not be the right height for you. The bars might not be right. The seat post, the crank length. It's very much similar to a motorcycle. And when you see guys racing, especially hardcore road racers, those bikes are built for them. So I went to this company because I had maybe 4 or 5 bikes before then. And when I retired, I was going to treat myself to a decent custom built road bike. And there's a system called, I think they call it Rutel. It's from like Switzerland maybe, but they've got a bike that's stationary, that's all adjustable. They sit you on it and they put little sensor stickers all over, and a video camera videotapes, records you going through the motion of cranking the pedals, and from there they can get the right geometry. My bike was custom built. It was about $3,500, where I know guys that race, that either do triathlons or road race, and they're well into the 10,000s for custom built bikes. Yeah.
For a bicycle.
Yeah, no, they're just as passionate about their sport as we are about ours. You think about how much money we spend after the purchase, right?
Yeah. Especially if you have a BMW with a dry clutch and you have to replace it.
Or just if you have a BMW and you go to any of the BMWs, aftermarket manufacturers, and right, you can farkle out a BMW.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The cliche in the biz is that BMW stands for bring more wallet.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's the same. And, look at the guys that own Goldwings, right? How much goes into customizing those? Everything else that's out there.
Have you ever seen one of those Goldwings that has like the ground effects lighting package?
Oh yeah.
It both cracks me up and impresses me at the same time, because I would never think to do something like that to my motorcycle. But how cool is that to see?
Are you kidding me? Have you not seen the Groms like that?
No, I haven't seen any Groms like that. Grom's the little tiny Honda, right?
Yeah, it's 125 cc, but there's an entire group out there on the internet that are customizing Groms, and they do now like these Grom rides where
I'll have to check that out.
Oh yeah,
Wes, you haven't lived until you've been swarmed by a Grom gang.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to recover from, I was in Baltimore one time. They have a real problem with hooligans in Baltimore. Young kids on dirt bikes and ATVs that will swarm. And I was going to an Orioles game once and got caught up in some of that. And it was actually kind of frightening, just the noise and commotion that was going on. It cleared up in about 5 minutes. They went on to, some other place, but
no, it's a big problem down here too.
And is it really?
Yeah. And the cops have basically said, we're not going to chase them. So that because of that, it's gotten larger. I was having dinner on Fort Lauderdale Beach about a week ago, and 2 guys are screaming up and down A1A on, dirt bikes that weren't street legal and they're wheeling. They're wearing no gear at all. They're cutting off cars and back and forth. I called the cops. Nobody ever showed up. So
I think the cops consider this a self-correcting problem,
Yeah. Which, is unfortunate, but, well, and kind of going back to that, Scott, your one son that's started riding recently. I wanted to ask you a couple questions about that. Do any of his friends ride, or have any of his friends shown any interest in riding?
Yeah, there's a group of buddies, they've all grown up together, and one of them's my younger son, and then they got some friends who are twins and stuff, and all 4 of those guys took the MSF class together as a 4-person group and had a good time. But he's just the first one to get a bike, but all 4 of them want to go riding and do that kind of stuff. But
do they seem to show the same commitment to using protective gear that riders like you and I show?
I mean, he's the only one who's riding so far, and he does ride all the gear. The other 3 guys, I assume, yes, because they talk about it, but the real test will be once they get out and ride. We'll know.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you've set a good example for them, and hopefully your son is setting a good example for them as well.
Right.
And they'll do that. That's one of the things that I'm concerned about when my daughter starts riding. Although, by the time she was born, I was already a BMW rider. So she's been around BMW riders her whole life. And she's used to seeing people from, helmet, jacket, gloves, pants, boots, the whole 9 yards all the time. Winter, summer, doesn't matter. And she has her gear, from head to toe as well. that I put her in because she was a kid, and they can't. As a parent, you have to make those decisions for your child. I would never put my kid on the back of my motorcycle or in the sidecar of my rig without a helmet on. I just wouldn't do it.
I think if kids grow up and their dad rides in t-shirt, no helmet,
then that's what they're going to do.
Well, it's the same as everything else. A kid grows up in a household where people smoke, they're going to smoke. Kid grows up with a parent that doesn't wear a seatbelt. They learn from example.
I mean, Steve, you used to ride, right? Just t-shirt, helmet, right? I mean,
you used to ride, Steve, right? Now you don't.
I'm gonna admit something.
That was a partial sentence, but I mean, you used to be a squid, right? I mean, when you were growing up,
I'm gonna admit that. Oh yeah. When I never rode without a helmet though, never. But you would catch me on a motorcycle in shorts, sneakers, gloves, and a helmet. And but you know what really changed it for me, Scott? Honestly, people think it's because my career in the fire service. That had nothing to do with it. I had like a 10-year hiatus when I didn't own a motorcycle. When I went back to the motorcycle, I thought to myself, like in the fire service, if you're going to go into a fire, you're going to dress for the party, right?
Right.
I'm not going to walk in shorts. And I thought to myself, man, it looks stupid riding a motorcycle with no gear on. You don't look like you belong there. And this is the dumbest way to rationalize having to wear gear. But that's honestly how it started for me. I'm like, you just don't look right. So then I started wearing it and kind of felt like, you know what? I'm more comfortable wearing gear than not. I'm not getting bugs on me or dirt. I'm not boiling in the sun. I'm covered up. And that the people that have that fallacy about, well, it's too hot. You've never worn good quality gear that's either ventilated or has an airflow through it, like Aerostitch. I wore an Aerostitch Darien year round in the summertime here, and it was like wearing air conditioning. Open all the vents, your sleeves are open, your hands are catching air coming up through the sleeves. The jacket's like kind of billowing like a sail, and it was super comfortable, Yeah.
Until you get to the red light.
Yeah, until you have to stop. And that's why I think lane splitting should be legal. So we're not sitting there waiting in traffic.
Yeah. Well, and no matter where you are, no matter what gear you're wearing, when you stop and it's 90 degrees outside, it's suddenly 90 degrees. If you're moving, that's one thing, but no matter where you are, no matter what your gear is, when you stop, that's when you get hit with the full force of the elements.
Yeah. And that's the advantage of having higher quality gear too, like Gore-Tex, where it can at least breathe. You're still going to get hot, but it's going to breathe, and you're not going to be as suffering as without that, Yeah. I actually prefer a Gore-Tex shell over completely ventilated gear, to be honest with you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's just a personal preference. What were you going to say, Wes?
I don't remember. I'd lose my train of thought so easily.
Well, listen, guys, we've been doing this for a while. Any closing thoughts, Wes? And you want to talk about where you can be found and what you do?
Yeah, sure. My podcast is called Chasing the Horizon. We're on the internet at horizon.bmwmoa.org, ORG, and every show has its own page, and there's information about the show, links for the news articles that I talk about, links for the guest, and then you can stream the article or stream the episode at the bottom of the page. And I'm on kind of a modified summer schedule. I've been putting out 2 episodes a month since last year. I did 4 in May. Scott was one of those. He was my closing episode for May. It was a great episode. But for the summer, for June and July at least, I'm going to be doing a little bit of traveling. So I'm going to modify the schedule a little bit and not put out as much, but I'll put something out. What was the other question you asked me? Where can people find me and what am I doing? That's about it.
That's perfect. We hope to have you on more. I know you're on Slack. So the people, just real quick, a shout out to the guys on Slack, which all 3 of us are on there, and I haven't been on in a while. But we're really supported by our Patreon members at the Cafe Racer podcast. We couldn't do what we do without the guys that support us. And if you want to get on Slack, which is a platform for communicating that's used in business, we have a lot of fun on Slack. There's a lot of content on there. There's a lot of guys on there that build motorcycles and have a lot of knowledge. Guys like Jed's. Go onto Patreon. Any amount helps us. I don't care if you donate 50 cents a month or $1 a month. That $12 a year helps us a lot to produce this content. And then you get access to the Slack channel. It's private. You also get access to our Rever group, which is closed only to members of Patreon. And then we can share rides, which we do quite often on Rever as well. But
Cool.
those of you that are out there that support us on Patreon, I want to thank you immensely. Scotty, tell them where they can find you.
It's real easy to find me, man. amenmoto.com.
AMENMOTO.com. Scott produces a ton of really fun YouTube content. I've been on some of the shows. His partner is out of town for a while, right?
Yeah. Doug is taking a job up in Raleigh. So he's shooting video on his side and snail mailing me his USB drives. So we should be getting some content from our Mid-Atlantic contingent.
Have you guys ever heard of Dropbox?
Well, we looked at it, Steve. The thing is, the videos are, you get these GoPro files that are
Several
a gig
gigs.
and a half, 2 gig each, right? And
that's a lot.
Like he did a ride on Memorial Day back from down here on his motorcycle up to Raleigh, and he shot. It's probably 40 gigs, and it's not that bad to download, but uploading is where you really run into a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a couple of test uploads, man, and it's just the video format is just too big. It's raw video on GoPro. It's just not going to work. So it would probably get here faster via the post office than it would through the internet from uploading it from an apartment or something. So, but he's going to send me a couple of USB drives of his ride up to Raleigh from Memorial Day. I think he got lost and he hit some rain, and that's going to be miserable. So I'm looking forward to laughing at that.
Well,
I'm looking forward to experiencing his
We miss
misery.
you. Yes. We miss you, Doug.
I'm looking
miss
forward
you,
to
Doug.
seeing that actually too. So
Yeah.
sorry we've been away for so long. I know you guys have been like, where are you guys at? But we're back, and as usual, I love talking to you guys. I think we've probably beat the horse up enough so far today on this.
Yeah. Well, before we get off, we get off, Steve. Why don't you tell people that are listening from my end where they can find you on the internet?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point because we're doing a dual show, right?
Yeah.
So you can find us at caferacerpodcast.com, www.caferacerpodcast.com. If you search for that on any of social media, we're there as well. We have a pretty good presence on Instagram. Again, Patreon. All you got to look for on Patreon is Cafe Racer Podcast if you want to support the show. And we're going to be at the AIM Expo. All three of us are going to be at the AIM Expo. If you can make it to the AIM Expo, it's in Vegas this year. It's going to be phenomenal. I love meeting listeners. So we're going to be there. Come check us out. Send us a line. Anything we talked about today, I'd love to get listeners' feedback, both from your show and our show, Wes. You can send us at I think it's feedback at caferacerpodcast.com, or you can send it to Crash at caferacerpodcast.com or Steve at caferacerpodcast.com. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on this. Maybe there's something that we're missing, or from a consumer of media, they can give us a little bit different insight. I'm watching the stuff that's been going on in the live chat on the YouTube, and we've got two guys on there kind of saying the same thing, mirroring what we're saying. So
cool.
That's where we're at.
Yeah.
So,
anybody that wants to email me can do that. Mine's podcast@bmwmoa.org.
On behalf of my guests, Wes and Scott, get out there and ride.
Absolutely.
See ya.